Discuss this now with Andreas Umland. He is an analyst at the Stockholm Centre for Eastern European Studies and joins me also from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Thank you so much for being with us on the program. Yesterday's meeting, as we know, between the foreign ministers of the U.S. and Russia marked a new chapter in both the three-year-long war in Ukraine and bilateral relations between the two countries. What do you make of this new structure that has been formed and led by the United States?
It's very worrisome because we have here two permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and two official nuclear weapon states under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, dividing up a regular member of the United Nations and an official non-nuclear weapon state under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that is a very worrisome signal to the entire world, is that if you trust in international law, if you trust international organizations, if you trust international solidarity, that will be a mistake, and your territory can be then divided by more powerful states. And that is, of course, a suggestion then to countries around the world to not trust the international order, but rather to get arms, to get weapons of mass destruction if you want to keep your sovereignty, your borders, and your territorial integrity.
The EU has been sidelined, and they're speaking of security guarantees, not just for member states of the European Union, but also for Ukraine as well at this point. Will Trump make any guarantees to the bloc?
The absence of the European Union here is also very surprising, because this is, of course, all happening on the European continent. Ukraine is an official candidate for membership in the European Union. And we had, at the beginning of the war in April 2014, the so-called Geneva format, when the US, the European Union, Russia, and Ukraine were having talks. We then had a so-called Geneva statement at the end of these talks. That would have been normally the appropriate format to have both Ukraine and the European Union at the table at such talks. But here we have two non-European powers, and I think very much Russia now considers itself a non-European country, that are deciding the future of Europe, of Ukraine and the European security structure. And that very much reminds actually of the Yalta negotiations at the end of the World War II, when the East European countries were given to Soviet imperialism by Western powers without asking them. And here we have this strange situation that larger outside powers decide the fate of Eastern Europe.
And of course, Zelensky voiced his frustration yesterday as well for not being part of those discussions. Do you think that he's going to eventually be forced to make concessions by the United States?
Yes, he will be eventually forced to do that. That is basically a repetition of the story of the Minsk agreements of 2014, 2015, when Petro Poroshenko, the predecessor of Zelensky, was also forced to sign absurd treaties with Russia, these Minsk Accords that actually obliged then Ukraine to conduct elections on territories that the Ukrainian state does not control. These were bizarre accords back then. And now we may again have this situation. The problem here is that this is not only a challenge for Ukraine, but that's a challenge for the international order, for the non-proliferation regime, for nuclear weapons, for the biological weapons convention, for the chemical weapons convention, because other countries will think that they don't want to be as stupid as the Ukrainians and believe in international law, international organizations, and international solidarity.
Okay, Andreas Umland, thank you so much for being with me here on the NewsHour and sharing that analysis with us.